A 7-foot behemoth, 300 pounds of raw muscle slick with foreign blood, smashed through the Mercy General sliding doors, instantly turning a quiet Tuesday shift into a potential slaughter. He swatted 3 security guards aside as if they were nothing more than minor annoyances, scattering terrified doctors and screaming patients while the police were still 10 minutes away. In that vacuum of authority, an unexpected silhouette emerged from the panic. Aurora, the timid rookie nurse who had been chewed out for shaking hands barely an hour before. But she stood her ground. She marched straight up to the Leviathan, locked eyes with him, and did something so reckless it froze the entire ER, proving the quiet girl was hiding a predator's heart beneath her scrubs. The wall clock in Mercy General's emergency department ticked over to 10 in the evening. It was a bleak, rainy Tuesday in November, the sort of night where the damp chill settles deep in your joints and the wind rattles the ambulance bay doors. Deep inside the triage station, the overhead fluorescents buzzed with that migraine-inducing strobe effect that only the graveyard shift truly appreciates. "Aurora, for the love of God, pick up the pace." Head nurse Brenda Miller's voice sliced through the low-level hum of the ER. Brenda was 50, hardened by the job, and moved with the brutal efficiency of a woman who had witnessed every tragedy imaginable and lost her patience for all of them. She planted her hands on her hips, staring down the newest hire. Aurora Jenkins flinched under the scrutiny. She was 28 but passed for a teenager. Slight, barely 5'4", with messy brown hair caught in a loose clip that looked ready to surrender at any moment. Her scrubs were a size too large, drowning her small frame in blue fabric. Eyes glued to the IV tray she was organizing, she refused to look up. "Sorry, Brenda," Aurora muttered, her voice barely audible. "I just wanted to double-check the saline ratios." "I don't pay you to audit the pharmacy, Jenkins," Brenda snapped, ripping a chart off the counter. "I pay you to stick veins and turn over beds. You've been here 3 weeks and you're still tiptoeing around like the floorboards are rigged with explosives. Dr. Sterling is already questioning my judgment in hiring you." Aurora nodded, a deep flush creeping up her neck. She stayed silent. She always did. Since starting at Mercy General, Aurora had existed as a phantom. She took her lunch breaks alone in her sedan. Whenever the heavy trauma arrived, car wrecks, gunshot wounds, the visceral mess of the city, Aurora faded into the woodwork to handle paperwork or restock gauze, leaving the blood work to the veterans. The staff consensus was unanimous. Aurora Jenkins was fragile. She was built for a quiet dermatology practice in the suburbs, not the meat grinder of an inner-city Level 1 trauma center. "Look at her," Dr. Gregory Sterling whispered to a resident. They stood near the break-room coffee machine, watching her. Sterling was the attending that night. Arrogant, brilliant, and carrying an ego so massive it barely cleared the doorframes. He pointed his coffee cup at Aurora, who was fumbling with a locked supply cabinet. "She's trembling. Look at that." "Maybe she's just cold," the resident offered. "She's terrified," Sterling corrected dismissively. "Some people are built for this life, others aren't. She is prey. In the wild, she'd be devoured in 5 minutes." Aurora heard every word. Her hearing was unnaturally sharp, though she feigned deafness. As she worked, her hands actually did shake, ever so slightly. But if anyone had bothered to look closer, really look, they would have spotted the anomaly. The shaking wasn't born of fear. It was the vibration of restraint. Breathe, Mike. Eyes on the wall. Count the tiles. You're fine. I have you." Her movements, usually clumsy under Brenda's hawk-like gaze, suddenly turned fluid and surgical. She applied the dressing with a mechanical symmetry, tight, efficient, flawless. Mike stared at his hand. "Damn, nurse, that was quick. You've done this a few times, huh?" Aurora blinked, seemingly snapping back to reality. She immediately slumped her shoulders, sliding back into the skin of the novice. "Oh, just a bit in school. Just practice." She scurried off before he could probe further. Back at the station, the radio sputtered to life, the static hiss announcing an incoming rig. "Mercy Base, this is Unit 42. We are inbound. ETA 3 minutes. We have a walk-in pickup from 5th and Main, male, approximate 40s. Highly agitated, possible substance abuse. He is massive. Vital signs are stable, but the patient is non-compliant. Brenda let out a sigh that carried the weight of 1,000 double shifts and pressed the talk button. Copy that, Unit 42. Dump the package in Bay 2. Sounds like another Saturday night intox fighting invisible demons. She shot a sharp glare toward the corner. Jenkins, Bay 2 is yours. Try to dodge the projectile vomit this time, all right? If he starts swinging, buzz the rent-a-cops. And don't play hero, she added. Understood, Aurora murmured, keeping her head down. If Brenda only knew the truth, heroism wasn't even on the list. All she wanted was to clock out in one piece and cash her check. Unfortunately, the universe had sketched out a very different schedule for the evening. The arrival wasn't merely intoxicated, nor was he simply large. The man was a human landslide waiting to happen. The automatic doors groaned open, inviting a chill wind laced with the scent of damp pavement and exhaust. The crew from Unit 42 didn't guide the gurney in with their usual swagger. They backed in like survivors retreating from a massacre. "Make a hole!" the driver yelled, his complexion ashen. "Guy wouldn't take the straps, he's on foot." Brenda blinked, finally tearing her eyes from the monitor. "Excuse me? You let a psychiatric intake stroll through the front?" Her scolding died in her throat as a massive shadow swallowed the triage station. The figure emerging from the ambulance bay had to tuck his chin to avoid scalping himself on the doorframe. He was simply colossal. Standing at least 6'10", the stranger resembled a fortification made of sinew and old wounds rather than a man. He was clad in a filth-streaked military jacket, straining against a chest twice its capacity, paired with trousers shredded at the joints. Yet it was the visage that froze every pulse in the lobby. A dense, neglected beard obscured his jawline, bisected by a cruel, jagged scar tracing a line from left brow to lip. His eyes were saucers, scanning the perimeter with the desperate, wild energy of a predator cornered in a cage. Despite the draft, sweat poured off him, and his ribcage expanded and collapsed like a blacksmith's bellows. The staff didn't know they were looking at Sergeant Jackson the Bull Hayes, nor did they realize he was currently deployed in a war zone constructed entirely of memory. "Where is she?" he bellowed. The baritone roar hit the room like a physical blow, vibrating the plexiglass dividers. Silence descended instantly. Even the infant in the corner ceased wailing. Dr. Sterling emerged from Trauma 1, wearing an expression of supreme irritation. "Excuse me? There is no shouting in my unit. We are a medical facility. Moderate your volume immediately, or I'll have security escort you out." It was a catastrophic choice of words. Jackson's gaze locked onto the white coat. The Chicago emergency room dissolved. The harsh, overhead LEDs became the scorching sun of the Korengal Valley. The rhythmic chirping of heart monitors morphed into field radio chatter, and the man in front of him wasn't a physician. He was enemy intelligence. "I asked for her location," Jackson charged. The acceleration was terrifying, defying the physics of a man with such mass. He ate up the 20 feet to the station in 3 massive steps. "Security! Help!" Brenda shrieked, abandoning her post to cower beneath the desk. By the snack machines, the hospital's first line of defense, Paul and Dave, looked up from their break. Paul was an ex-beat cop, carrying 50 extra pounds and bad knees. Dave was a 20-year-old undergrad covering tuition. They scrambled forward, batons in hand. "Sir, down on the floor!" Paul yelled, grabbing a bicep as thick as a tree trunk. It was as effective as a child trying to tackle a locomotive. The sergeant didn't even grant him eye contact, delivering a backhand swat without pausing his advance. The strike connected with Paul's sternum, lifting the 200-pound man clean off the linoleum and hurling him into a sterile supply rack. Steel instruments scattered with a deafening clamor. Dave, the student, froze in place, his raised baton trembling violently. "Sir, hey, sir, please don't." Jackson seized the boy by his tactical vest, hoisted him with a single arm, and discarded him like a sack of dirty linen. The guard skidded across the wax finish and met the drywall with a bone-jarring crunch. Bedlam consumed the room. Nurses shrieked and abandoned their stations. Visitors and patients in the waiting area clawed over rows of connected seating, desperate to reach the automatic doors. Dr. Sterling, realizing his medical degree offered no protection against a titan in a fugue state, drained of color and stumbled backward into a crash cart. "He's armed," a voice cried out. Jackson hadn't drawn a firearm. Instead, he'd torn a steel 1-5 pole from its base. He gripped the heavy rod like a slugger at the plate, testing the weight with a menacing swing. "Hit the dirt! Everybody down!" he roared, addressing phantoms only he could see. "Incoming! Mortars! Take cover!" The steel pole crashed into the reception partition, exploding the safety glass into 1,000 glittering diamonds. Glass fragments showered the screaming staff huddled beneath the counters. Aurora Jenkins, however, stood rooted near bed 2, hugging a clipboard like a shield. Her eyes were wide, taking in the devastation, her heart battering against her ribcage like a trapped bird. Yet she didn't flee like the rest. She analyzed. She noted his gait. This wasn't the clumsy stumble of an addict. He was slicing the pie at corners. He was clearing sectors of fire. He was securing his 6. He isn't psychotic, her mind raced. He's tactical. As the pole swung through the air, she caught a glimpse of ink on his forearm. 75th Ranger Regiment. "He's in a flashback," Aurora whispered. "Jenkins, move your ass," she told herself. "Get to the lounge and lock it!" Renda screeched from her hiding spot. Aurora remained planted. She couldn't leave. If she retreated now, this would end in a body bag. Dr. Sterling was pinned against the plaster, and Jackson loomed over him, raising the steel rod to deliver a terminal strike. "Give me the extraction coordinates," Jackson screamed into the doctor's terrified face, spittle flying with his rage. "Talk to me." The plea disintegrated into a messy sob as Dr. Sterling threw his hands up in surrender. "I swear I don't know. I haven't the faintest clue what you're referring to." "I'm begging you," Jackson bellowed, every fiber of his hulking frame coiling tight, prepped for the kill. Quietly, Aurora let her clipboard slip from her grasp. Plastic clattered against linoleum. She didn't retreat. She advanced. 30 feet of dead air separated the young nurse from the man mountain. For the spectators peering over overturned furniture and partially drawn dividers, it looked less like an intervention and more like a death wish. Beside his bulk, Aurora appeared fragile, almost childlike, as if a stray gust of wind would topple her. "Aurora, don't do it!" wailed Jessica, a senior nurse. The warning went unheeded. She refused to run. Flight only triggers the predator's instinct to chase. Instead, she moved with a measured, rhythmic cadence. Her gaze bypassed the makeshift club, locking onto his eyes. 10 feet out, she planted her feet. "Sergeant Hayes?" Gone was the soft-spoken murmur of the rookie. Her voice emerged sharp and resonant, projecting from the diaphragm with the undeniable weight of command. Jackson turned pistone. The heavy metal stand hung suspended just inches above Dr. Sterling's skull. That single word, "Sergeant," sliced through his mental haze. He pivoted on his heel, scanning the room for the superior officer who had issued the order. His eyes landed on a slight figure drowning in blue scrubs, though his hallucinations rendered her edges indistinct and shifting. "Identify," Jackson barked, dropping into a combat stance, prepared to engage. "Corpsman up," Aurora bellowed back. The specific terminology, the battlefield cry for a medic, hit home. Jackson blinked rapidly, the fury in his eyes battling with sudden disorientation. "Dock is clear. Stand down, Ranger," Aurora stated, her tone forged from steel. She closed the distance, palms exposed at chest height, non-aggressive yet prepared. "We are in the green zone. Perimeter is fully secure. You are flagging a friendly. Weapons tight." Dr. Sterling, still trembling on the tiles, gazed up at his subordinate in utter disbelief. The jargon flew over the doctor's head. Jackson, however, shook his own violently, wrestling with the phantoms in his mind. "No. Inbound. Hostiles have breached the perimeter. I need to secure Mary." Mary is safe." The lie came easy, her voice steady as a rock. She inched forward, closing the gap to 5 feet, well inside his kill zone. A single blow from that instrument would pulverize her rib cage. "I just radioed command. Mary is waiting at the LZ. She is holding for you, Sergeant, but you cannot approach the extraction point armed. You know the protocol." Jackson's breath caught in his throat. He glanced from the steel bar in his grip to the nurse, the mask of rage cracking to reveal a bottomless, heartbreaking grief. I can't cover her," he rasped, a single tear carving a path through the grime and sweat on his face. "I'm too slow. Always too damn slow." "You are not slow," Aurora murmured, shifting seamlessly from officer to healer. She took one final step, closing the distance to just 2 feet. Craning her neck to meet his gaze, she held him there. "You are the lead element, but the OP is finished, Jackson. Weapon down." She extended a hand, trembling not from terror, but from the electric hum of adrenaline, and laid her fingers on the cold metal of the IV stand. "Relinquish, Sergeant." For a heartbeat, the entire room seemed to hold its breath in suspended animation. The white-knuckle grip loosened. He searched her face, scanning for any hint of a lie. Is the squad safe?" "All clear," Aurora confirmed. With a shuddering exhale, Jackson surrendered the weapon. She accepted the burden and lowered it gently to the tiles. Then, the fragile spell shattered. Behind them, the elevator chimed, loud and cheerful. 2 officers stormed out, sidearms leveled, screaming over one another. "Police, drop it! On the ground, now!" The aggressive wall of sound demolished the delicate reality Aurora had constructed. Jackson's eyes snapped wide. These weren't friendlies. This was an ambush. The green zone had been compromised. "Ambush!" Jackson howled. Abandoning the pole, he lunged for Aurora. In his fractured mind, she had morphed into a threat, an infiltrator who had led him into a trap. A hand the size of a shovel clamped around her throat. He hoisted her into the air like a rag doll. "Traitor!" he roared, the grip tightening. "Shoot him! Take the shot!" "Doctor!" Sterling shrieked from his prone position. The officers hesitated, fingers hovering on triggers, terrified of hitting the hostage. Aurora swung in the air, legs thrashing in the void. Black spots danced across her vision as the crushing pressure on her windpipe intensified. Her larynx was seconds away from collapse. Yet Aurora Jenkins did not panic. Even as her face darkened to violet, her gaze remained razor-sharp. She didn't claw futilely at his wrist like a victim. She hunted for his thumb. She possessed knowledge the police, the doctors, and even the soldier lacked. She knew how to dismantle the human form. Using the last of her oxygen, Aurora swung her legs upward, scissoring them around Jackson's massive bicep for leverage. She isolated the digit, torquing it violently against the joint while simultaneously driving her elbow into the radial nerve cluster in his forearm. It was a textbook Krav Maga counter, executed with lethal precision. Jackson bellowed in agony, his iron grip failing instantly. Aurora hit the linoleum, lungs burning, but she refused to cower. As Jackson stumbled, clutching his injured arm, he launched a desperate, wild haymaker at her skull. That swing carried enough torque to take her head clean off. Aurora slipped under the blow, pivoting sharply on her left heel. She ghosted into his blind spot, stomped the back of his knee to shatter his stance, and snaked her arm around his throat. This wasn't a barroom headlock. It was a clinically applied vascular strangulation. She locked the hold, her forearm sealing his carotid arteries against his spine, instantly stemming the flow of oxygen to the brain. "Go out, Sergeant," she hissed into his ear, straining against 300 pounds of thrashing muscle. "Just let go." Jackson kicked like a roped steer. He threw his weight backward, slamming them both into the drywall to crush her. Aurora grunted at the impact, but didn't loosen her grip by a millimeter. She triangled her legs around his waist, locking her ankles tight. The hooks were set. She was a tick, clinging to a raging bull, impossible to shake. The cops stood frozen, weapons lowered, jaws slack. Dr. Sterling watched, useless and stunned. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. The fight drained out of the giant. His arms went limp at his sides. His massive legs finally buckled. Aurora guided the collapsing dead weight to the tiles, maintaining the pressure until she felt the tension leave his body entirely. She checked his vitals, strong rhythm, then scrambled away, clutching her own bruised throat, fighting for air. The room fell into a heavy silence. Nothing could be heard but the refrigerator hum and the nurse's ragged gasps. She sat up, fixing her disheveled hair clip, pulling her oversized scrubs back into place to hide her frame. 50 eyes bore into her. Head nurse Brenda rose slowly from the station, face pale. "Jenkins?" she breathed. "What? Who are you?" Aurora stared at her own hands. She forced them to tremble. She glanced at the sleeping Titan, then at the paralyzed officers. "He needs 10 milligrams of haloperidol and 2 of Ativan," she rasped, voice wrecked. "And get a cardiac monitor. Check for arrhythmia." She stood, ignoring the stares. I need the restroom." She brushed past the bewildered officers and the gaping doctor, bursting through the double doors. But the narrative had already shifted. As the rookies moved to cuff the unconscious Jackson, Captain Miller, the veteran, held up a hand. He replayed the takedown in his mind, the efficiency, the mechanics of the hold. Then he noticed the paperwork on the floor. VA records. But it wasn't the patient's history that bothered him. It was the math. It didn't add up. "They don't teach that in nursing school," Miller murmured to his partner. "That was Tier 1 operator tech." He stared at the swinging doors. "Who is that woman, doctor?" Sterling smoothed his pristine white coat. His dignity shattered, but his arrogance replaced by sharp curiosity. He marched to the terminal and pulled her HR file. Name, Aurora Jenkins. History, school nurse, St. Mary's Prep. References, generic. "Bullshit," Sterling whispered. "It's all bullshit." He grabbed the phone. He had a contact at the Pentagon. 3 a.m. in D.C., but he didn't give a damn. He needed to know who was hiding in his ER. The bathroom mirror was a spiderweb of cracks, fracturing Aurora's reflection into jagged pieces. She white-knuckled the porcelain sink, staring at the stranger looking back. Dark bruises were already blooming on her neck, purple evidence of the giant's grip. She splashed ice water against her burning skin, trying to wash off the combat high. "Idiot," she hissed at the glass. "Idiot." "Stupid. You blew it." 3 years of being a ghost, gone in seconds. She was supposed to be Aurora Jenkins, the nobody from Ohio. Not the weapon that could dismantle a ranger in 6 seconds. Not the asset with a file so redacted it barely existed. She fished a battered silver coin from her pocket. She rubbed the metal with her thumb, a grounding ritual. Breathe. Deny. Deflect. The door creaked. Brenda entered. The shouting was gone, replaced by a terrified respect. She held out an ice pack like a peace offering. "Aurora?" Her voice was uncharacteristically soft. "Cops want a word in the break room." Aurora dried her face with a rough paper towel, instantly hunching her posture, becoming the mouse again. Am I in trouble, Brenda? I didn't mean to hurt him. I just panicked." Brenda studied her. "Panic? Aurora, that wasn't panic. You folded a man who tossed security guards like rag dolls. You saved Sterling's hide." She stepped closer, handing over the cold pack. "For your neck." "Thanks," Aurora whispered, pressing the cold against her throat. "Who are you really?" Brenda asked, eyes scanning for the truth. "Just a nurse," Aurora lied, eyes on the floor. "Nurses don't move like that," Brenda said quietly. "My ex was Force Recon, 2 tours in Fallujah. The way you handle yourself, it's identical. The way your eyes sweep a room." "I took a self-defense seminar at the YWCA," Aurora lied, keeping her voice small. "The instructor was very thorough." Brenda didn't buy the act, but she knew better than to push it. "Let's go. Captain Miller's waiting." The break room air hung heavy, smelling of stale coffee and microwave popcorn. Captain Miller was camped out at the wobbly round table, his notebook splayed open like an accusation. He was a veteran cop, pushing 60, with eyes that had cataloged every lie Chicago had to tell. Dr. Sterling hovered next to him, checking his expensive watch every 30 seconds, radiating impatience. Aurora slid into the chair, shrinking into herself to appear harmless. "Miss Jenkins," Miller grumbled, his voice like gravel in a mixer. "Hell of a performance out there." "I was terrified," Aurora whispered, forcing a tremble. "Terrified folks run," Miller said, monotone. "They scream. You didn't do either. You engaged a hostile combatant. You talked him down using service lingo, then dropped him with a textbook rear naked choke and a body triangle. That's not terror, that's muscle memory." He leaned across the table. "Where did you serve?" "I didn't," Aurora said, widening her eyes innocently. "I've never been enlisted." "I swear." "Then how did you know to yell, 'Corpsman up'?" Miller fired back. "How did you know to call the lobby a green zone? How did you clock him as a ranger just by spotting a faded tattoo on a moving target?" Aurora swallowed the lump in her throat. This was the slip-up. "The details. I watch a lot of movies. Black Hawk Down, Zero Dark 30. I just guessed." Dr. Sterling stopped his pacing and let out a sharp, arrogant laugh. "She's lying, Captain. Look at her carotid. Pulse is steady. She's not nervous. She's performing." Sterling marched over and slapped his palm on the table. "I pulled your file, Jenkins. St. Mary's Prep in Ohio. I dialed the reference number on your CV 10 minutes ago." Aurora's heart hammered against her ribs, but her face remained a mask of confusion. "And?" Miller asked. "Straight to voicemail," Sterling announced, smuggling a smirk. "But not a school administration line. A burner. A generic Google voice greeting. And that nursing license number you gave us? It checks out with the state board, sure. But the issue date is 3 years ago. Exactly 3 years." "Where were you before 2021, Aurora?" "Taking care of my sick mother," she improvised smoothly. "She had dementia." "I was off the grid." "Bullshit," Sterling spat. "You're a fraud. You're a liability to this hospital." "Doctor, back off," Miller growled. He turned his gaze back to Aurora. "Look, miss, I don't give a damn if you padded your resume. That guy out there? Jackson Hayes. He's restrained and sedated now. We ran his prints. You know who he is?" Aurora shook her head. "Silver Star recipient," Miller said quietly. "Served 4 tours. Rangers. Delta Force. He went AWOL 6 months back from a VA psych ward in Maryland. The military put out a bolo. Be on the lookout. They consider him armed and extremely dangerous." "And you put him down for a nap like a toddler." Miller snapped his notebook shut. "You did good tonight, but civilians don't do good with that kind of tactical precision. If you're in trouble, if you're running from something, you can tell me." Aurora looked into the captain's tired eyes. She saw a flicker of genuine worry there. For a heartbeat, she almost cracked. She wanted to say, "Yes, I'm running. I'm running from the ghosts of a village I failed to save. I'm running from the medals they tried to pin on my chest while the blood was still fresh under my fingernails." But she couldn't. "I'm just a nurse," she whispered, adding a slight quiver to her voice. "Can I please go back to my patients now?" Miller sighed, the weight of the job slumping his shoulders. "Go. Just don't skip town." Aurora stood and fled the room. The moment the door clicked shut, Dr. Sterling whipped out his phone. He punched in a number he hadn't dialed since his residency at Walter Reed. "Colonel Sharp? It's Gregory Sterling." "Yes. Listen, I have a situation here. I need a deep dive on a ghost. Goes by Aurora Jenkins. No, definitely an alias. She just neutralized a Tier 1 operator in my ER with her bare hands. I'm dead serious. Sending her photo now." Sterling snapped a shot of Aurora through the break room glass as she retreated down the hall. "Send." "Gotcha," he whispered. 2 hours dragged by. The adrenaline spike in the ER had crashed into the dull, gray fatigue of the graveyard shift. The giant, Jackson Hayes, was cuffed to bed 4, snowed under with sedatives, 2 cops standing guard. Aurora busied herself counting 1 5 bags in the supply closet, putting as much distance between herself and the main floor as the walls allowed. She could feel the net tightening. She had to vanish tonight. Pack the bag, jump in the beat-up Honda Civic, drive until the tank runs dry. Maybe Arizona this time, maybe Montana. She was just reaching for her locker key when the PA system crackled to life. Code Black, main entrance, Code Black. Code Black meant a bomb threat or a mass casualty event involving a VIP. It meant total lockdown. Aurora froze. They found him. She sprinted toward the nurse's station just as the automatic doors to the main entrance were pried apart. The automatic doors didn't glide open. They were forced. 6 operators in heavy tactical kit stormed the entrance. Clad in black fatigues and helmets, rifles slung tight, they flooded the lobby. They moved with a lethal grace that exposed the hospital security guards for the mall cops they were. No one screamed. The team fanned out, locking down the perimeter with silent, terrifying efficiency. In their wake strode a man who wore authority like a second skin. His dress uniform was crisp, the fabric struggling to support rows of ribbons and the 3 silver stars weighing down his shoulder. General Tobias Holé. A suffocating silence gripped the emergency room. Doctor. Sterling, who had been smirkily awaiting a colonel to return his call, let his clipboard clatter to the floor. He had dialed up a middle manager and summoned a god of war. A 3-star general standing in his trauma center meant this was wildly above his pay grade. Who runs this floor? Holé demanded. He didn't yell, yet his voice dominated every corner of the room. Sterling stepped up, smoothing his coat, desperate to salvage his crumbling importance. That would be me, Dr. Gregory Sterling. General, I assume you're here to collect the prisoner, Sergeant Hayes. Holé looked at him with sheer contempt. I'm here for my soldier, yes. Is he breathing? He's chemically restrained, Sterling replied. After he battered my staff and trashed my facility, I expect the Department of Defense to cut a check for full compensation. Holé walked right through the doctor's complaints, heading straight for Bay 4. He gazed down at the unconscious giant, Jackson Hayes. The general's hard expression melted into something paternal. He rested a hand on the sergeant's shoulder. I've got you, son, Holé murmured. Time to go home. He pivoted to his squad. Get him ready to move. I want him inside Walter Reed before the sun comes up. Hold on a second, Sterling stammered. You can't just extract him. There are criminal charges pending. The police, the United States Army has jurisdiction here, Holé snapped, cutting him dead. Sergeant Hayes is a classified asset. As far as the world is concerned, tonight never happened. Am I clear? Sterling flushed crimson. This is a civilian hospital. What about that nurse? He nearly ended her life. Holé stopped cold. He rotated slowly. Nurse? The girl who subdued him? That's the one, Sterling said, jerking a thumb toward the rear corridor. You should be investigating her. She dropped a 300-pound war machine without messing up her hair. If your man is a classified asset, then she's a lethal weapon. Holé's gaze tightened. Let me see the tape. Captain Miller, hovering at the perimeter, stepped in. He presented a tablet loaded with the security feed of the brawl. The general studied the display. He watched Aurora approach Jackson, saw the de-escalation, saw the chokehold. As he watched, the blood deserted the general's face. The ironclad military mask crumbled. Run that back, Holé ordered. Tighten up on her face. Miller pinched the glass. Aurora's pixelated features filled the screen. Holé exhaled, a sound like a tire losing air. Impossible. He snapped his head up, eyes darting around frantically. Where is she? Where is this nurse? Hiding in a supply closet, probably, Sterling sneered. I told you, she's a fraud. Holé seized Sterling by his expensive lapels, yanking him close. The fury burning in the general's eyes terrified the doctor. You listen to me, Holé hissed. That woman is no fraud. If she is who I think she is, she's the only reason everyone in this room is still breathing. You have no idea what walked through those doors. Who is she? Sterling stammered. She's the ghost, Hole said, releasing him. Sweep the floor. Lock down every exit. Nobody leaves. Find her now. The tactical team broke formation, kicking in doors. Aurora peered through the crack of the linen closet down the hall, her heart slamming against her ribs like a trapped bird. She knew General Hole. She'd served under him in Syria. She was the one who dragged him out of a burning Humvee in Damascus when his detail was wiped out. She was the one who vanished 3 years ago because she knew too much about the op that went sideways, the operation that broke Jackson Hayes. He knows, Aurora thought. If he finds me, I go back to the black site or I go to prison. She looked at the back exit sign glowing red at the hall's end. It was 50 yards away. Between her and the door stood 2 tactical operators. She touched the silver coin in her pocket again. Fight or flight? Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Unknown number. She answered, keeping her voice to a whisper. Hello? Aurora Jenkins, or whatever you're calling yourself today, a distorted voice said on the line. Look up. Aurora tilted her head toward the security camera. The red light was blinking. Who is this? A friend, the voice said. The general isn't here to arrest you. But the men with him? They aren't regular army. They're contractors, mercenaries. If they take Jackson, he's dead. If they take you, you're dead. What? Aurora's blood ran cold. Hole is compromised, the voice said rapidly. He's being blackmailed. He's the cleaner. And you, Jackson? You're the mess. You are a loose end. You have maybe 30 seconds before they kick in that closet door. You need to grab Jackson and vanish. Get him out. Right, because dragging a 300-pound unconscious man is so easy, Aurora spat back. Then wake him up, the voice crackled in her ear. Service elevator to the basement morgue is on your left. Move. The line went dead. Aurora peered down the corridor. A tactical operator was sweeping toward her hiding spot, rifle shouldered and ready. He wasn't doing rounds. He was hunting. Aurora kicked the door wide open, but she didn't run away. She sprinted straight back into the fire, back toward the lobby, toward Jackson. She burst into the trauma base screaming, General Hole! Hole whipped around. Pure shock registered on his face when he saw her, followed by a fleeting shadow of relief. Then came the shame, heavy and dark. Secure her, Hole barked at his squad. Do not fire, just detain her. But the men didn't lower their muzzles. 2 of the operators brought their carbines up, aiming center mass at Aurora's chest. They weren't listening to the brass. They answered to a different payroll. The world dragged into slow motion as Aurora watched their knuckles whiten on the triggers. She was 20 feet from cover. She was a walking corpse. Then the room shuddered. Bed 4 detonated. Jackson Hayes, who should have been comatose, tore the safety rail off the gurney like it was wet cardboard. The restraints popped, shearing the thin metal frame with a screech of tortured steel. The giant was online, and he was livid. He vaulted off the mattress, throwing his massive bulk between the kill squad and the doctor, just as the muzzles flashed. Crack, crack. 2 rounds buried themselves in Jackson's spine. The man didn't even blink. He snatched the lead operator by his helmet and drove him into the linoleum hard enough to spiderweb the tiles. Move, Doc! Jackson roared at Aurora, his eyes suddenly sharp, the haze gone. Get to the lift. Aurora didn't debate him. She skidded across the floor, snagged a scalpel from a sterile tray, and severed the straps binding Jackson's ankles. Basement, she shouted. Go! The emergency room dissolved into a war zone. The elevator doors groaned shut just as the observation glass disintegrated under a spray of automatic fire. Aurora hammered her fist against the B2 button. Basement level 2. The morgue. The silence inside the steel box was heavy, punctuated only by Jackson's wet, raspy breathing. The big man slumped against the paneling, dark blood saturating the back of his ragged field jacket. Watch your 6, Jackson grunted, voice thick with agony but tactical sharp. Did they breach? We're clear for now, Aurora replied, hands already working. She tore the back of his jacket open. 2 ugly, puckered entry wounds. They caught you in the trapezius and latissimus. No exit wounds. The lead is still inside. You're bleeding out, Sergeant. Jackson peered down at her. The PTSD fog had burned off, incinerated by the adrenaline of the fight. He studied the petite woman who had choked him out an hour prior. He clocked the scar behind her ear, usually covered by hair. "Captain Jenkins," he whispered, eyes widening in recognition. Is that really you? The report said you were vaporized in Aleppo." "They lied," Aurora said flatly, packing the wound with gauze she'd stolen from a crash cart. "They erased us, just like they're trying to erase you." The general, Jackson grimaced as the lift lurched downward. "Olé, he was right there. Why is he hunting us?" "He's not hunting," Aurora corrected grimly. "He's sanitizing. He authorized the Black Book op that wiped our unit. If we breathe, his pension and his private contractors go to federal prison. Those men upstairs aren't regulars. That's Black Arrow, mercenaries. They don't do handcuffs." The elevator pinged. Ding! The doors parted to reveal a void. They'd cut the power. The only illumination came from the emergency reds, throwing long, bloody shadows down the concrete tunnel. "Move!" Aurora commanded. They stepped into the guts of the building. This wasn't the sanitized world of medicine upstairs. This was where the dead were kept, where the laundry was washed, where the incinerators burned. A labyrinth of piping, steam, and shadows. "They're running night vision," Aurora whispered. "We're blind down here. We need an equalizer. I can hold the corridor." Jackson rumbled, fighting to stay upright as the blood loss hit. "I'll buy you a window to exit." "Negative, Sergeant. We walk out together or nobody walks," Aurora hissed. She scanned the room. Chemical storage adjacent to the morgue, her gaze locked on the industrial supply rack. Ammonia, bleach, and on the wall, a fire hose reel. "Jackson," Aurora said, her tone dropping to absolute zero. "Can you rip that pipe off the bracket?" She gestured to a steam line tracking the ceiling. Insulated, but scalding. "Easy," Jackson muttered. "On my mark, rupture it. Flood this hall with steam." Their goggles rely on thermal signatures and light amplification. Steam scrambles thermal. It'll turn their high-tech optics into blindfolds. Heavy boots hammered the concrete stairs at the far end of the corridor. No elevator for this crew. They were professionals, rushing the floor with the disciplined urgency of men paid by the hour. "Company," Jackson rasped. 4 crimson beams sliced through the gloom, dancing across the damp walls like searching eyes. A sanitized voice buzzed in an earpiece somewhere ahead. "Visual confirmed. Drop them." Aurora didn't wait for the punctuation. Jackson bellowed, launching his bulk upward to seize the overhead conduit. Muscles tearing with the effort, he hauled his entire weight against the rusted iron. Metal shrieked, then gave way. A geyser of superheated vapor erupted, screaming into the narrow passage with the ferocity of a ruptured boiler. The roar erased all other sound. Instantaneously, the world vanished behind a wall of blistering white fog. "Sensors are washed out. I can't see a damn thing," one of the hit squad shouted. Aurora seized the confusion. "Belly down! Move!" They hit the slick tiles, slithering underneath the searing cloud that filled the upper half of the corridor. Wild gunfire chewed up the ceiling, rounds sparking harmlessly overhead. Aurora pushed forward, a phantom slipping through the haze toward the men hunting her. She emerged right in front of the point man, who was uselessly scrubbing his lenses. Firearms were too loud for this range. The stolen surgical blade flashed. She severed his tendon, dropping him to his knees, and silenced him with a brutal strike to the skull using the steel grip. The man crumpled. Aurora snatched his carbine mid-fall and lobbed it back into the mist. "Suppress them," she hissed. Jackson snagged the receiver out of the air. Despite his injuries, his hands were steady. He squeezed off 3 precise double taps. The rest of the squad went down, Kevlar plates shattering under the close-range impact. "Hostiles neutralized," Jackson called out. "We're not done," Aurora murmured, her fingers on the fallen man's neck. "Radio is open. The upstairs team heard every scream." "Loading bay, now!" They scrambled past the rows of stainless steel lockers where the city's forgotten dead were stored. The chemical stench of preservation fluid mingled with the copper tang of spilled blood. They crashed through the heavy service exit. Cold wind slapped them. The storm was still raging, but as they crested the ramp, a stadium-grade floodlight blinded them, turning the rain into falling diamonds. "Freeze!" A command, not a request. A blacked-out tactical vehicle blocked the alleyway. General Holloway stood there in a trench coat, flanked by hired guns. His service weapon was drawn, but the barrel pointed at the wet asphalt. He lacked the conviction to raise it. Looming behind him was Kane, the contractor in charge, looking through the scope of a long-range rifle aimed squarely at Aurora's forehead. Water streamed down Aurora's face, washing away the grime. She braced her shoulder under Jackson, whose massive frame was trembling from blood loss. "End of the line, Captain," Holloway yelled over the downpour. "The grid is closed." "Local cops have the outer ring, but this zone belongs to my unit. Drop the gun." Aurora studied the old man's face. She saw terror there. He was just a suit now. The real power lay with Kane, who wore a shark-like grin. "Think, General," she shouted. "If they take us, the truth about Sandstorm dies with us. Is that what you want?" "Save the speech," Kane grunted, tightening his finger. "Hold on." Holloway stepped into the line of fire. "They are assets. We need them breathing. We can spin this." Kane's laugh was a dry, metallic rattle. "You're missing the point, General. The contract changed. You're not the paymaster anymore. You're just another loose end." The mercenary drew a pistol and put a round through Holloway's chest. The general collapsed, looking more surprised than pained as he hit the wet ground. "Damn it!" Aurora cried out. "Wipe the slate," Kane told his team. "Leave nothing." He swung his rifle back toward Aurora, disregarding the wounded Hulk beside her. That was his fatal error. Jackson emitted a noise that vibrated in the chest. It was a guttural growl of pure fury. He shoved Aurora behind the cover of a pillar and launched himself forward. Unarmed and empty, he turned his own body into a projectile, sprinting directly into the muzzle flashes. Rounds hammered his chest plate, twisting him, but 300 pounds of desperate momentum doesn't stop easily. He smashed into Kane's bodyguards like a freight train. The collision was sickeningly loud. Ribs shattered, and the two heavily armored men were tossed aside like rag dolls. Kane tried to track the target, but Jackson was already inside his guard. The big man seized the rifle barrel, wrenching it skyward just as the trigger broke. The bullet obliterated a street lamp overhead. Jackson slammed his forehead into the mercenary's nose with a sickening crack. Kane folded instantly. The adrenaline finally ran dry, and Jackson's legs turned to water. He hit the pavement hard, life leaking out from a dozen holes. "Jackson!" Aurora broke cover, skidding through the rain to cradle him. "Perimeter secured, Cap," he rasped, red froth gathering at the corners of his mouth. Did I do my job?" "You did perfect, Ranger," she choked out, trying to stem the flow with her hands. "Just hold on." The air filled with the wail of approaching cruisers. Red and blue strobes cut the darkness as Captain Miller led a phalanx of uniformed officers down the ramp. "Chicago PD, drop it!" Miller bellowed. Aurora slowly raised her empty, blood-stained hands. "Man down! We need immediate medical evac. Officer down!" Miller sprinted into the slaughter, eyes scanning the wreckage. Unconscious hired guns, the lifeless body of the high-value target, and the massive soldier bleeding out in the nurse's grip. He locked eyes with the woman. He saw the desperate strength in her hands as she compressed the wound. He saw the ruins of the private security team. "Get a trauma team in here stat," Miller screamed into his comms. As the rescue squad swarms the area, shoving the woman aside to work on the soldier, the captain knelt beside her. "The VIP is gone," Miller murmured, his voice low and grave. "These guys? Private contractors. This is a political nightmare, kid. Federal agents are 5 minutes out. If they find you standing over a dead general with your specific skill set, they'll bury you in a black site so deep sunlight won't find you." She stared back, unwavering. He needs trauma surgery. He needs the specialists at Walter Reed. I'll handle the logistics, Miller vowed. I'll paint him as the savior who protected the facility. He walks away, a hero. But you? He glanced at the carnage, then pointedly toward the loading dock's gaping maw and the shadows beyond. I didn't see a suspect here, Miller said, holding her gaze. I just saw a terrified bystander fleeing the scene. Move! She gave the wounded giant one final look. The medics had him loaded up. Vitals were holding. He'd make it. She gave Miller a single, sharp nod of gratitude. Then she was gone. No hesitation. She dissolved into the rain-slicked alleyways of Chicago. Just another shadow in the storm. 6 months down the line, sunlight flooded the rehabilitation gardens at the military hospital. Sergeant Hayes was chair-bound, leg braced up, but the color had returned to his face. Clean-shaven, the 1,000-yard stare had finally softened. A staffer approached with his mail. Delivery, Sergeant. No sender listed. He weighed the thick envelope in his hand. Tipping it over, a single item slid out, along with a scrap of paper. Silver flashed in his palm, his old unit's challenge coin. The note was scrawled on generic hospital paper. Word is you're mobile again. Take your time. The world is short on Titans. Ghost. A grin broke across his face as he squeezed the metal disc. He gazed up at the clouds. Loud and clear, Captain, he murmured. End transmission. To the average passerby, the woman was invisible, just another face in the crowd. They saw trembling hands and a meek demeanor. They missed the predator lurking beneath the surface, waiting for the moment to strike. Hayes wasn't a beast. He was a battered weapon that just needed a steady hand to aim him right. That night proved something crucial. Real power isn't about making noise. It's about what you do when the system fails and the lights go out. That nurse is still out there, pouring your coffee, teaching your kids, or maybe checking your blood pressure while you doom scroll. Watch how you treat the invisible people. You never know who's just pretending to be harmless. If this story hit home for you, do me a solid. Smash that like button. It helps us highlight more stories about the unsung heroes. What's your take? Was disappearing her only option? Or should she have faced the music? Sound off in the comments. I read them all. And if you're new here, hit subscribe and ring that bell. Don't miss out. Next week, we've got a tale about a firefighter who walked into an inferno and found a secret the city tried to burn. Trust me, it's a wild one. Thanks for tuning in. Stay safe.